Global inequality has exploded, with the richest owning more and more. We are at breaking point. Now, this graphic shows the growing gap between the top and bottom over the last 30 years. Note the drastic increase between the top 50 people. There is an increase in wealth across the board, but the poorest are only receiving 2 to 4% of growth compared to 8.51%. 8.51% of the very richest. Now, economist Thomas Piketty has revealed the World Inequality Report of 2026, which shows that the top 0.001% have 3 times as much wealth as the bottom half of humanity.
Today we are releasing our World Inequality Report. The general result is fairly clear. Inequalities persist at a very extreme level throughout the world. Here are 4 figures in order to illustrate this fact.
Look at this figure. The world's top 10% richest individuals own 3/4 of everything there is to own on planet Earth, while the bottom 50%, that is 4 billion individuals, own just 2% of the total. These wealth inequalities are also extreme within countries. Typically, the bottom 50% owns less than 5% of the total, even in a country like the United Kingdom, the United States, or Brazil.
This represents the gap in public spending in education throughout the world. In sub-Saharan Africa, children on average have access to 200 euros of public spending per year, as opposed to 9,000 euros for children in the global north, 45 times more. This is the situation of extreme inequality that we have in the world today.
Look at this figure. The richest 10% in this world account for 47% of global emissions associated with their consumption. And this share even increases to 77% if we look at their ownership of private capital, so the production processes they control. At the same time, for the global bottom 50%, so for the poorer 4 billion people in this world, this share is at only 3%. This shows how inseparable the climate crisis is from the concentration of wealth.
This graph shows that for these 5 countries, the ultra-rich pay proportionally less than the rest of the population. This regressive pattern deprives society of a lot of resources that could be spent in education, health, and climate adaptation.
I saw this, I think it was a tweet or it was a video, it was very good, and someone said, the world is like a resort for 500 people, and the rest of humanity are like the staff. I mean, that's such a good way of putting it. It's so true. Now, Gary Stevenson shared this and he gave his take. Why we need to tax the super rich more. Their wealth is growing much faster than everyone else's, and they're using it to outbid you for real resources, housing, assets, healthcare, education, and everything else of real value. I mean, he's right. We cannot sustain this level of inequality. Again, that figure, the top 0.001% are not just more wealthy than the bottom 50%, they have 3 times as much wealth. I remember when I first looked into how bad inequality was globally, and we're talking 10 years ago, and they said you could fit a coach full of people, I think we're talking 30, 40 people, and they had, and the top percentile had as much wealth as the bottom 50%. So we're talking 20, 30 people having the same wealth as half of humanity. It's now 0.001%, and it's not as much as 50%. It's 3 times as much as the bottom of humanity. If there's anyone out there who doesn't think that's a problem, you're crazy. We cannot carry on like this. But of course, there have been those who argue against a wealth tax, usually not on its merits. Now, after Zach Polanski appeared on the Rest is Politics podcast, Rory Stewart not only attacked him, but also those who Zach found inspiration from.
Who are your intellectual influences here?
Brilliant people. So Grace Blakely, Richard Murphy, who's been doing a lot of work on this, Gary Stevenson, who I know you've had on recently, James Medway, lots of different economists though. A lot of the time it's just reading the stuff that they're talking about. And I think there is a consensus that the neoliberal model has broken and it's not worked.
Consensus where? From people like Gary Stevenson, or where's the consensus? Where's the academic consensus here?
I think the academic consensus is among economists who aren't working for the government. I think they're all looking at government decisions.
You see Gary Stevenson as a sort of pseudo-academic economist, or a...
I don't think he's pseudo-academic. I think he's literally an economist. That's his job.
I was horrified beyond belief on the economic stuff. It's not acceptable. Guy's got almost 20% of the vote in some of these polls, right? He could be part of a coalition government.
I'll tell you what's not acceptable is being part of a government and a minister that instituted austerity. 330,000 people were killed, Rory. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, I've hated the last couple of years of, the Liberals where they engage in their revisionism. They're doing it with Theresa May, where it's like, oh, they're not that bad. Actually, Rory's all right. No, he's not. He's still a Conservative. He's still a Tory. And I mean, I don't know if you guys have watched the full podcast. I've seen a couple of clips. And Rory does this thing where he goes, I want you to give me numbers. Zach, tell me numbers. And to me, that's not a proper discussion. It's basically, how good's your memory? He's saying, how much of a percent do we spend on debt? Or what is the cost of servicing our debt every single year? And sure, you can cite numbers left, right, and centre. I mean, he praises Rachel Reeves as someone who can do that. Who cares? Because it doesn't go to the heart of the conversation, in which Zach was trying to say, look, let's not get boiled down into these very specific numbers, which is through the lens of mainstream economists and sort of orthodoxy economic thinking. I need to talk about broader ideas, but because Rory Stewart doesn't think that way, because at the end of the day, he's a conservative, he's a wealthy person, right? He sees things through the mainstream economic orthodoxy. So he expects you to answer the question, well, we're spending £100 billion a year just servicing the debt. When in actuality, economists, who sort of support modern monetary theory, for example, will say, that doesn't matter. What matters is we have money to spend and we can print money or use quantitative easing, or we can actually print money directly. And it doesn't matter how much we spend because it's tied to inflation, resources, and yes, the value of the currency. So there is a bit of market play here going on. But Rory doesn't understand that. I think it was also really bad the way he denigrated the sorts of people that Zach Polanski took inspiration from. Now, granted, Grace Blakely isn't an economist. She's never said she's an economist. She's a Marxist who analyzes the political economy. That's still a very important job or role to play in society. You need people criticizing economics. You need people criticizing the mainstream economic theory. Richard Murphy, right? Yes, he's an accountant, not technically an economist, but that doesn't mean that either of them don't understand the economy. Anyone can learn. But for Gary Stevenson, he said he was a pseudo-economist. Sorry, Rory, I mean, are you an economist? Do you have a PhD and a doctorate in the economy? I think he's got a philosophy degree. That's it. Now, I didn't even go to uni, by the way. I'm not saying that having a degree or a certificate makes you smarter. I don't think it does. It certainly shows skills, of course. But you don't need to have a PhD in economics to talk about it. But it just so happens that Gary Stevenson does. In fact, he has two master's degrees in economics from the University of Oxford. Now, look, why would Rory Stewart have a strong, visceral reaction? I mean, he was in that clip saying, I'm horrified. I'm absolutely horrified. He didn't have that same reaction when it came to Nigel Farage's quotes when he was at school, anti-Semitic racist comments. I mean, he spoke about it, but did he respond in horror? No. So why was he horrified? Simply, it's a class thing. Rory Stewart is a conservative. He doesn't understand that you can make radical public policy in favour of the working class. So no matter how much liberals revise him and say he's not that bad, or how he calls himself a centrist, how he'll go on a podcast and speak to different people and be open-minded, fundamentally, he is a conservative who sees life and society through the lens of the wealthiest in society. Once a conservatives, kind of always conservative. Samuel, this level of inequality is unsustainable. But is the Green Party's policy of a 2% wealth tax actually anywhere near enough of what we need in order to rectify this?
Well, I mean, those of you who know me, I am much more a radical in terms of what I believe can be done. I think many of us are. But I think it's a good starting point. I think the conversation has been so slanted to the right when it comes to economics, when it comes to thinking about the economy in general. So the idea and the principle of targeting the super rich, and the idea of a progressive taxation system where, it feels kind of crazy to think that we have to say these things, but sure, the people with the biggest shoulders should, bear the biggest burden of the tax burden. And so often it's not the case. You have, I'm sure many of your audience will be aware of this like crazy statistic where it's like a secretary could be paying a higher effective tax rate than a billionaire. So that injustice in the system is built in. And I think that what Zach is addressing is that inequality, and the 20% in the polls, or maybe even higher now, is a function of basically people saying, yes, that's what we want. For so long, the conversation has been gatekept by a certain faction of the right, which is to say that no, we can't spend. The proponents of austerity very fiscally conservative when it comes to fixing issues that deal with working people's lives, but all of a sudden very fiscally reckless when it comes to bailing out the bad decisions of corporate Britain, if you will. So yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think for me, it will be kind of crazy for the Green Party to say we're going to have 100% wealth tax. It's not something that I disagree with, by the way, but to go to the electorate and try and say that's not going to work. So, from my understanding, it's kind of putting that on the agenda. Let's talk about a very small wealth tax. It's not going to make a radical difference. In fact, it won't make much of a difference, right? But I think when you move the Overton window and try and put these ideas into the public realm, people then accept it, and then yes, in 5-10 years time, let's say we do have a wealth tax, hopefully the conversation won't be whether we need a wealth tax or not. The conversation will be how high should a wealth tax be. I mean, that's how the Overton window changes, right? So I do hope that it's going to be higher. But I think going back to Rory Stewart, I mean, the way he patronizes people. I think even when Gary Stevenson went on his podcast, he was so patronizing because one thing is definitely true. Gary Stevenson is a working class person. Well, he's not working class anymore. He's a multimillionaire trader, but he came from a working class background. He's got the accent, proper Cockney accent, the London accent. Rory Stewart is simply just a very posh person and speaks posh, right? That's where he gets his accreditation from. People take him seriously because I'm Rory Stewart and I speak very properly. But you can see even in today's standard, the classism is there. I mean, what do you make of Rory Stewart just being so utterly patronizing?
Well, I think actually you made a good point earlier with how it was very disrespectful approach from Rory's point, where he was sort of hitting him with numbers. Well, how do you know this? Well, about what's the number about this? What's X? What's Y? What's Z? Well, actually, in conversations like this, sometimes, yes, okay, it's good to deal with facts and figures. But then also, I think he was just trying to do a gotcha moment and not actually engage in a meaningful discussion about the economy from someone else's perspective outside of this small conservative faction, which has held on to the keys of the treasury for, should we say, 4-5 decades now? Certainly since Margaret Thatcher. This move away from Keynesian economics to this sort of holistically privatized economy. And I think that, like I keep on referring to, this rise in the polls is a reflection of a thirst, a genuine thirst for an alternative, because it's been going on for so long. People's wallets aren't getting any better, and constantly they're seeing that they're super rich. And I think it's important in these discussions. I don't know what you guys think. Maybe it's a strategy thing, but when you talk about tax the rich, I do feel that some people who are, I don't know, let's say 80,000, 100 grand, maybe even up to maybe like a small time millionaire might feel, whoa, this is, I'm not making that much or whatever. And now obviously we'd all disagree. I think that's a lot. But, these taxes, as I understand them, are aimed at the people who are basically dragon hoarders, I call them. It's like, basically have hoarded the entire sections of the economy to the point where money isn't flowing down, it's just being kept. And the injustice, of course, as everyone knows, is that, the rich get richer because by design, if they put their money in, and as I heard this said the other day, if you just put your money in an account, 1 million, in a year, how much interest is that? If you have 10 million, if you put that in a bank, how much interest is that in a year? If I'm a poor person and I haven't got capital to begin with, if I put my measly £20 investment, how much interest am I going to make on that in a year? So I think those injustices are baked into the system. And I think that Rory's approach was totally wrong. I think he was trying to do a gotcha moment. And I think that people are seeing through that now.
Oh, 100%. It was a gotcha moment, because I think if you were to have an intelligent conversation, you want to discuss ideas, and especially if Rory's so open-minded. But it was a gotcha. I mean, look, if you were to ask me what's the debt right now and how much we're spending on servicing debt, I won't know, but I can just go on Google and find out, and there we go. There's your answer. But it's also not understanding that Zach Polanski will have advisors around him, right? So even if he doesn't know a specific number, it's not catastrophic that you would have a prime minister that doesn't know a specific number. You get experts around you. So it was definitely a gotcha. I definitely can link this to Karl Marx. Thankfully, anytime I can, I will. What you were saying, the point you made about, the point you were saying about if you have £1 million, you stick it in the bank and interest accumulates on it, you make loads more money. If you've got no money in the bank, you won't make much money. Karl Marx predicted this. Capital accumulates capital. The more money you have, the easier it is to make. And that is why we have an explosion of inequality, because we haven't had strong government intervention to stop it. We've decided to lean into the free market and decide to privatize our very important services, and that's how it's happened.